So I just spent the last 5 days going through every single filing in the Justin Baldoni Blake Lively saga with a fine-tooth comb, including an 800-page filing by Blake Lively that did break my printer, and I know you did that on purpose, only to discover that the smoking gun we have all been waiting for was this small little filing that was hiding right beneath our noses and is really going to expose Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds for the conniving people that they are. So as always, grab a bowl of popcorn and take a seat because it's going to be another long night. Now, before we go through all of this, and there's a lot, trust me, I do have to address some drama with you guys. So I'm not going to name any names because I'm just not that type of person. But about a month ago, I had someone who I considered kind of a mutual friend block me on TikTok because of my content surrounding this case. A little bit of a disagreement, that's completely fine. Personally, I would approach someone, and have a discussion. Not everybody's like that. And she kind of thought that I, along with other people, were spreading harmful misinformation, right? That buzzword that everybody loves to use, misinformation and disinformation, which I've kind of started to realize that people love to use that when they just don't have a proper argument that they can articulate. So one of the points of disagreements that we had and points of misinformation I was apparently spreading was this lie that Justin Baldoni was kept in the basement during the premiere, and that's not possible because that specific movie theater did not have a basement. So this was her argument. So I decided to go to New York City myself and visit the movie theater where the premiere happened, and I can 100% confirm, and I'll include the footage here, that there is a basement in that movie theater, and there is in fact a storage closet that I found. And I did try to actually go inside of it, but they kind of tried to call security on me and thought I was being very sketchy. So I didn't actually enter the storage closet, but I was able to sort of sneak my phone under the crack and get some video clips for you guys, which I can confirm, and you guys can as well, based on the photos that Justin Baldoni shared from the night of the premiere, that was the storage closet that he was basically held captive in because Blake Lively didn't want to be in the same room as him. So this is just kind of a small example of how certain people don't want to reckon with actual factual reality, which has always been something strange to me. And I hope you guys know that my only intention is to get to the truth, and I will do my best to continue to do that. Also, since I don't get paid for my content, I would really appreciate it if you guys could press the follow button. It's completely free and it helps me out a lot. So, the smoking gun. Now, I want to give full credit to a sleuth named Without a Crystal Ball who discovered this secret filing. I think Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively probably hoped it would remain secret, but it's not anymore. And I want to explain why it's such a significant escalation in this case. So one of the ongoing mysteries of this entire legal saga has been what many people have dubbed Subpoena Gate. So if we remember, the entire thing that started this lawsuit and the explosive text messages that were included in the original New York Times article were text messages that were stolen off the phone of Jennifer Abel by her employer named Stephanie Jones. They, being Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, alleged that they issued the subpoena to Stephanie Jones. So already this is very atypical because if someone is issuing a subpoena, they usually issue the subpoena to the individual, and then it's connected to an ongoing case. It's not just thrown out of the blue. And at that point in time, there was no ongoing case because nothing was actually officially filed until the middle of December. So as to how they got a subpoena has been kind of a point of confusion for a lot of lawyers and legal experts as well. And this is pointing to a very nefarious plot that they may have used to get that subpoena and those messages. So on September 27th, 2024, a company named Van Zandt Inc. filed a lawsuit. Now, who owns Van Zandt Inc., you may ask? Well, of course, at the scene of the crime, once again, it is Ryan Reynolds and Blake Reynolds, which I have now learned is actually her legal name. It is very strangely written, but the first sentence will give you guys an indication of its contents. It says, this action arises out of an ongoing campaign to damage plaintiff's business and plaintiff's reputation. Sounds kind of like a smear campaign. And what's so interesting is instead of listing actual defendants, they list does. So like John Doe, Jane Doe. It's just a fictional name that they chose because they don't know who the defendants are, which is very strange considering they presumably knew who the defendants were because they were obviously eventually to go after Justin Baldoni and Wayfair Studios. So it mentions many things. It mentions breach of contract, it mentions violating a duty of care, and they're even seeking compensatory damages for these accusations that they're making. But interestingly, it doesn't mention the word sexual harassment once. Nowhere at all in this document does it do that. And to make it even more mysterious, the filing was dismissed by Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds on December 19th, 2 days before the New York Times article dropped. So here's my little theory on what happened. I believe that Stephanie Jones is an evil, vindictive, and vengeful person who could not deal with her protege Jennifer Abel leaving her company and also possibly taking her clients like Justin Baldoni and Wayfair Studios with her. So when Jennifer Abel was set to leave the company, she took Jennifer Abel's cell phone and illegally extracted the messages from her phone using that software called Celebrate. Now, Stephanie Jones did this for various reasons. She was a very paranoid individual. She thought that Jennifer Abel was lying to her, stealing company secrets, stealing clients away from her, and plotting against her. So, when she saw those messages, particularly between Jennifer Abel and Melissa Nathan, she was sent into a psychological spiral, particularly because she, being Stephanie Jones, had previously had a vendetta against Melissa Nathan because Melissa had refused to work for her. And the main text messages that were used in the New York Times article were between Jennifer Abel and Melissa Nathan. So it was a win-win scenario. Stephanie Jones could throw them both under the bus. So Stephanie Jones then calls Blake Lively's team, probably Leslie Sloan, and says, "Hey girl, I have some very damning information that you'll want to see, and it might help Blake Lively rehabilitate her reputation." At this point, Stephanie Jones had been losing so many clients, it stands reasonable to assume that she would love to get in the good graces of someone like Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. Leslie Sloan sees the text messages that day because they are immediately sent to her, and then Leslie Sloan calls Melissa Nathan and says, "We're gonna sue the shit out of you guys." So then Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' lawyers say, "Hey guys, sorry, we can't use those text messages because they weren't obtained legally." So they already know that they're in existence, so Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds cook together this plot that say, let's just, slap together this random civil lawsuit that nobody's gonna read, and this will be the basis to which we can subpoena Stephanie Jones, who of course didn't put up a fight and pretended to send them the messages when in reality they had already seen them. But then their entire plot completely backfired when Justin Baldoni actually fought back because Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds never wanted a real legal battle. They simply wanted to do this administrative filing alongside the New York Times so they could make it seem serious and rehabilitate Blake Lively's reputation at the expense of throwing Justin Baldoni and an entire studio under the bus. But now that this very shady maneuvering they've conducted with the subpoena is actually being investigated, they could end up looking really bad and possibly being in legal trouble. So now I'm going to quickly get you guys up to date with all the latest filings. So first, Wayfair Studios requested an extension to amend their complaints and also respond to all of the arguments. This was actually later denied by the judge. Jed Wallace has filed a memo further supporting his motion to be dismissed from this entire debacle and called Blake Lively delusional. Blake Lively then filed a response to give further support to her motion to dismiss herself from a disaster she created. Blake, Ryan, and Leslie Sloan all wrote to the judge saying that Wayfair Studios should not get an extension, and then the judge agreed with them and denied Wayfair Studios' extension for April 18th. Jennifer Abel filed saying that her previous employer, Stephanie Jones, is financially liable for anything that she could end up owing. Stephanie Jones filed something basically saying, "I ain't paying for shit." And then she filed to dismiss Jen Abel's attempt to indemnify the entire legal battle, which basically means that Stephanie Jones would have to pay for everything. Wayfair basically responded to the judge and said, "It's fine, we're not going to amend our complaints anyway." New York Times then entered the chat with further support for them to be dismissed from this entire legal battle. This was probably the strongest argument I've read, and I could see the New York Times being dismissed. The Wayfair team filed two very strong oppositions to Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds attempting to be dismissed, and I think they made some very strong legal arguments. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds then responded to Wayfair's opposition to both their motions to dismiss, and I thought their arguments were very weak, and they definitely focused on the defamation aspect. Blake Lively also responded to Jed Wallace's motion to dismiss and told him to eat shit. And lastly, Blake's shampoo company entered the chat and said, "Please don't reveal our private information." And Blake was also named one of Time's most influential people of the year.